Well, welcome and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. This is presentation spotlight 2 of 4. We kicked it off last week with some phenomenal presentations, and today we are continuing the trend. My name is Deanna Jimenez. I am core faculty in the Somatic Psychology Department, and today I am honored to be representing the Emerging Black Clinicians Fellowship, a fellowship where I am program manager, and I've had the honor of supporting these scholars over their fellowship journey. I am beyond grateful for the grant that has afforded the opportunity for Black identified students at CIIS to be supported in the community as they integrate their course studies with Black psychology and in the service of Black communities. At this time, I would like to introduce 3 key people whose work and involvement have continued to play an essential role in this grant being possible. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Adiba Deverville, who will speak to her creation, Black Psychology Project at CIIS.
Hi, everybody. So excited and so happy to be in Zoom community with all of you. One day we'll all be together in person again, I hope. So a little bit of history on the Black Psychology project at CIIS. So some of that history involves the name change and the evolution of it over time. So way back in 2015, my beloved Rachel Bryant and I, we were cubicle buddies. And she was the director of the MHSA grant at that time. And she noticed that I had all of this Black psychology material at my desk. At that time, I was the program coordinator for the Master's in Counseling Psychology department. And so she noticed that I had all of this stuff on Black psychology. And she said, "Hey, Adiba." And I was like, "Hey, Rachel." She says, "I have an idea. Why don't we start a project where we recruit students from the 5 concentrations in MCP, give them a year deep dive into Black psychology, and take them to the Association of Black Psychologists International Convention, and then have them do a teach-in to all of the other students at CIIS." And I was like, "Hey, that sounds like a really good idea." So in 2015, we created the MHSA ABC cohort. And that was the very first offering of what is now the BPP at CIIS. And over the years, we repeated that process in a variety of different ways. We got some grant funding for an expanded version of it and all kinds of different things. And in 2021, we officially became a part of what was then the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And also at that time, Rachel became the director of what was then the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And so together now, the Black Psychology Project has become officially a part of CIIS and the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion under the guidance of the Vice President of DDEI and under the leadership of LaTronda Lumpkins, who has served for the last 2 years as the project assistant under me for the BPP. And now she is the project manager for the BPP. So all of this was made possible in part because of the construct of JEGNAship. So JEGNAship is a concept that is a co-learning, mutual knowledge sharing process that has allowed us to be able to sustain not only the BPP, but to expand into what you all are going to experience today, the Emerging Black Clinicians Fellowship Program. And so it's through this process of sharing knowledge on African-centered Black psychology and emerging, all of us are constantly learning. Even though I've been a part of the Association of Black Psychologists for more than 30 years now, and I currently serve as the General Assembly Chair at the national level. So I do a bunch of stuff for everybody who's a part of ABPSI. And I'm also the co-chair of the certification in African Black Psychology. So if anybody's interested in getting certified in African Black Psychology, reach out to me and let me know. Even though all of those things are true, I'm still studying. I am still learning. I am still emerging myself. And so this is an ongoing practice. This is an ongoing learning. And so I'm really, really excited to see and witness the emerging Black clinicians that we have presenting today. And I'm going to close with that and hand it back over to Deanna.
I can never get enough of hearing the origin story. It is so exciting. And in my excitement of introducing you as the founder, the originator of BPP, I missed the roles that you play now as core faculty in the School of Undergraduate Studies, Bachelor of Science Psychology, and founding director for the Center of Black and Indigenous Praxis. Thank you for your busyness and relentless work on this project. Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce Rachel Bryant. Rachel Bryant is the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Hello.
Hi, Deanna, and hi, everyone, all the students, all of the special guests here today. I'm really excited. I attended the first session last week and learned a lot in the spirit of Jegnaship from our students and the work that they're doing. Adiba, I am not sure if the story happened that way. It's become legendary. I'm not sure who had the idea, but the point is that Adiba and I have been working for more than a decade now, just baby step chipping away. And all of a sudden it bloomed in the last couple of years. This project, the Emerging Black Clinicians Fellowship, was made possible by a generous donor who cares about community mental health, who wanted to step up because she saw the inequity and the gap in culturally relevant care for the Black community in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and we know beyond, and all of the reasons. You are a very special group. You are like, you know, we say the ancestors' wildest dreams. You are like our wildest dreams, those of us who've been at CIIS a long time, especially as students who didn't have anything like this. And so I congratulate all of you, and I'm not going to take any more space up, except to acknowledge my team. Not only is the work of Black psychology and supporting students of color beginning to flourish, so is the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So I want to acknowledge the director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, who runs a lot of our communications and programs, Damali Robinson, who's working, I'm sorry, Damali, I put a B in there, who is doing a lot to create a sense of belonging, something we desperately need on our campus, and Paula Jun, who has the beautiful roses showing, but who is the backbone of the division with technical support, administrative support, and visionary strategic support. So I just wanted to acknowledge my team. It takes a team. And I look forward to hearing your presentations. Thank you to everyone who attended today as well.
And thank you so much, Rachel. And now I'd like to call in Heidi. Heidi is the clinical director of Huckleberry Youth Services and a wonderful partner with us with Emerging Black Clinicians and CIIS. So Heidi, hello.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be back for this second week, and I was actually looking forward to this today, just seeing everybody again. As Deanna mentioned, I am the clinical director at Huckleberry Youth Programs. I also have a private practice where I specialize in seeing clients that have complex trauma and PTSD and trauma related to Black and Indigenous and marginalized communities and codependency and addiction. So that covers a lot. that I'm sort of involved in. If you don't know about Huckleberry, we're a nonprofit agency in San Francisco. We have been around since 1967, and Huckleberry has been working to work with the underserved and marginalized youth in San Francisco to educate and inspire and support them. So we've been building a relationship with CIIS over the past few years. We have an alignment with our mission and our values and projects like this. I am particularly passionate about this project. I wish I had had something like this when I was going to school. We had nothing like it. So just seeing the opportunities you guys have to be in this fellowship is so wonderful. What I am passionate about is, as Rachel talked about, the gaps in equitable care, culturally equitable care in the community. Black communities right now have an inordinate amount of hardship, and only 25% of the Black youths seek out psychological services. And there are a few main reasons. There's lack of diversity with counselors. There's no Black counselors. And so with that kind of disparity in the mental health community, it's difficult for folks in our Black communities to find therapists they feel comfortable enough talking about race-related trauma or cultural issues. I'm going to share my statistics every time because they're astounding and I want you to remember them. In the United States, 76% of therapists are white. 76%. 10% are Asian, 6% Latino, and 4% are Black. So hear that again and let it stick in your mind. There are 4% of all therapists in the United States are Black. So this is why I'm here, and I'm invested in the community, and I'm invested in you and the work that you're doing to become clinicians. Part of Huckleberry's goal is advancing this conversation on diversity and equity and inclusion, and I'm just so happy to be here and support you. Today, I brought a guest from Huckleberry just to say hi and wave, and Munda Torres, if you could wave. Munda is a clinician at Huckleberry Youth Programs, and she's sort of a senior clinician. I'm going to ask Munda to put her information in the chat also. If you ever have a question about working at a nonprofit, you just want to ask a question, I'll put my information in there also. Any questions, if we can answer them, if we can support you, let us know, and we'll put our information in the chat. And thank you, Deanna.
I am inspired each time I hear the team speak, because it's one of those like coming to a job when everyone has the same mission and everyone plays their role to make it happen. And so I appreciate each of you for speaking, and I appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you, Heidi. I will also, we're going to shift and go into our presentations, but I just want to say that at the end of our time together, following the two presentations, I will be here to answer any questions around applying for the 2022-2023 cohort. We are currently accepting applications through mid-November, and our cohort begins in December. It will run from December through June, and then finding the opportunity for these presentations. So please stay behind if you are interested in learning more about this, this fellowship at CIIS. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our two guest speakers. Yes, they're guest speakers. Our two speakers today. I have Jen Larsh and I have Ashley Kellum. First, I will introduce Jen Larsh. Jen is a 2023 graduate candidate, Master of Arts in Counseling, Expressive Arts. Hello, Jen.
Hello, everyone. Let me get my stuff shared. All right. Can everybody see that? Move some things over.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming today and being here for our presentations. This is very exciting, also very nerve-wracking. So must mean I'm invested. So today I'll be speaking about tween mental health, how to understand, support, and expand tweens' mental health resources, and yours too. So feel free to use these for yourself. So first, about me. I identify as a middle-aged, queer, spiritual agnostic, working class, light-skinned, white-skinned, mixed race African-American who works using an integrated therapeutic arts model currently in my practicum, with emphasis on the goals and ideals that are Afrocentric, womanist, liberation, abolitionists, and relational cultural. I have 2 undergraduate degrees from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, including an interdisciplinary Bachelor's of Arts and a Bachelor of Fine Arts in printmaking and fiber work. I worked previously in the South Berkeley YMCA area. We did 15 years of academic after school and summer programming. I then moved into HR and workforce development and left all of that to come back into working with kids and families to do therapy. I am currently working in my practicum for the Child Therapy Institute, which has me at 2 locations. One is Berkeley Arts Magnet, where I currently have 4 clients and will soon be starting a 4th, 5th grade boys friendship group. We can do it. And then also we do outpatient work in the San Pablo office. I also put what I'm doing now is the consummate Auntie Jen. I have nieces, nephews, baby cousins, friends' kids, been doing it a long time. I don't have any children myself, but I have raised children and parents. All right, so today's flow, we're going to be discussing some of the things that tweens are dealing with currently, especially when we're talking about those that started their maturation in the pandemic. Because Dr. Detterville was very specific last week that she wanted things to be as blackety black as possible, I've decided to give some of my offerings through the Into Psychotherapy framework. And I'm extra nervous because Dr. Tracy Garrett is in the Zoom, and she's the one who showed us, gave us our initial introduction to this framework. And I am absolutely using things from her presentation, and I have given reference to that. So this is our flow for the day. We'll be talking about strengthening emotional awareness and regulation, supporting stress and anxiety reduction, developing a better understanding of relationship dynamics, and improving interpersonal communication. All of these things can be supported for tweens to help with their overall emotional development. So first, let's talk about tweens. So something that I think is really important, that as I was looking through to see sort of what tweens in this period of time are going through, and when I say tweens, I mean generally children in the 10 to 13 age, and something called precocious period or precocious puberty. And this is something that skyrocketed during the pandemic, often because it is directly related to things like stress. And this is when puberty starts early for girls and boys. It can start as early as age 8 for girls and as young as age 9 for boys on average. This is something that is really exploded. Some of the statistic that they gave is in India, one group would normally have referrals, about 180 referrals for precocious puberty. They had 300. In India, one of the practitioners there who deals with references or referrals for precocious puberty would normally get 20 per year. She got 300 in referrals for that in the last 2 years. All right. So early puberty tends to mean there are other mental and physical issues, though in most cases they really can't be found. And that's because largely what we know is that stress, grief, reduced physical activity, and increased consumption of unhealthy foods lead to those, have correlations, I should say, to precocious puberty. And suffering from or experiencing, I should say, precocious puberty can increase rates of depression, eating disorders, substance abuse, and antisocial behavior. And again, the reason why I thought this was important to mention is when we're talking about these young kids, 8 years old at the start of the pandemic is now a 10, 11-year-old. So we are talking about tweens that have been developing quicker, have been stressing out, whose hormones, as we know, are going through and they are coming to the body and into the brain in an incongruent way. So normally brain development hits at a certain period of time along with our hormones. Hormones are flooding brains sooner before some of the logical thinking areas have developed. And so there's a lot of overstimulation and dysregulation in our tweens. Other things that we can look at that happen because of things like this is adultification. Specifically for Black bodies, there's two kinds of adultification. There's a process of socialization in which children function at a more mature developmental stage because of situational context, especially low resource community environments, single family homes where older children have more responsibility with younger children. This is also something that's very cultural, okay? But it can also be done because of cultural stereotyping. And we know this is absolutely true for African-American children. This is how there's a bias for perceived in the absence of knowledge of children's behaviors and verbalizations, excuse me. Because of that, children, Black children specifically, are seen as less innocent and more adult-like than white children, especially between the ages of 5 and 14 years old. This is true for boys and girls. That means that adults often think they need less nurturing, protection, support, and comfort, and that they should be more independent and know more about adult topics, including sex, right? So this is, adultification can be a form of dehumanization, robbing Black children of the very essence of what makes childhood distinct from all other developmental periods, innocence. And so I think it's really important that we look at how this is progressing and working for the children that we work with. Okay. Also, a lot of what is happening now and is included in some of the, or is creating some of the effects like precocious puberty, is just general overstimulation. We see this in kids today with technological overload. They have climate stress. We know that there's concerns about school shootings, and generally we're seeing a lot of issues with sensory processing. And so with all of these things, this is a lot to be, dealing with as a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old. It's really a lot to deal with at any age. And so what I hope to do is, once I get through giving a very short introduction of the Into Therapy framework, is discussing some activities through that framework that can help support these tweens in this space. All right. So as I mentioned, this is an Into Therapy framework, a very short introduction. So Into, it was developed by Dr. Frederick B. Phillips, and it is a spiritually based and aims to assist people and systems to become authentic, balanced, within a shared energy and essence that is in alignment with the natural order. Okay? So as you can see on the slide, it's based in the core principles of ancient African and Afrocentric worldviews, nurtured through African-American culture and augmented by concepts and techniques of Western psychology. It has a number of different characteristics, values, and groupings that it works with. Specifically, it is spiritually oriented, family-focused, culturally competent, competency-based, it's holistic and systemic, and it is also values-driven. Now, Into specifically, she heard me say it's pronounced Into, it comes from the Bantu, which is a Central African cultural group. It's a term that translates to essence. So when they're talking about Into psychology, you're talking about something that is relating to and absolutely connected to the essence of all life, which then we know, especially when we're talking about like, I've just blanked on it. Optimal psychology is a healing force. I see you, Dr. D. You were bringing it to me. Thank you. Healing force. We hear that a lot from Dr. Linda James Myers. And so I thought it was really important for us to look at this framework because it is so much about the family, even as you're just looking at an individual. So it's about community. And that community is what ultimately provides support and synergy to the growth and development of children and families. All right, so it is a developmental and relational framework, again, derived from African psychology and the humanist perspective. It has a few basic assumptions that I think are really important to go over, and that our people are innately good. I relate this to the idea of like children are not born racist, something that you learn. People have good intentions. think the example that can be given here is if someone steals some food from you, their intention is to feed themselves, is the idea. And so even though it feels negative to you because your food is gone, it was good for them to try to feed themselves. People want to be happy. I think we can all agree that when people are in their best selves and in their best spaces, and again, in that essence of life and in the synergy of the world, they want to be happy and they can be happy. Healing is a natural process. This is something that our bodies do naturally. This is something we see in nature. And it's something that we as adults, as psychotherapists, as parents can help facilitate as part of that healing process for people that we work with or people that we're caregiving for. And ultimately, the purpose of behavior is to actualize potential, to really bring out the best in ourselves. Everybody wants to reach their best self. Right? Now, the 4 things that I think are most important for us to discuss and look at today would be the INTO principles. So these are the 4 principles that move through into psychotherapy. And those are the principles of harmony, balance, interconnectedness, and authenticity. Harmony is the union of mind, body, and spirit. It's really a state of being. Balance is the process of establishing equilibrium between seemingly opposing life forces. And then interconnectedness is the mutual dependency or the relatedness between all life. And finally, authenticity is our genuineness and realness. And these are things that we want our tweens to be able to strongly develop for themselves, to have strong and healthy mental health states and self-care actualization. So when discussing harmony, what we're really talking about is strengthening emotional awareness and regulation. Phillips says that the goal of the mentally healthy person is to be in harmony with the forces of life. Okay, if you want to be living your life, not fighting or controlling your life. Okay, so harmony is a result of reading the internal and external cues in and around our life in a manner that confirms to our discrimination. To me, it's important here, this idea that we have an understanding of what is happening, not just outside of ourselves that affects us, but our internal signals. And so the activities that I looked at here have a lot to do with building internal interoceptive awareness. Now, when someone is in harmony, you'll see characteristics like positive acceptance of oneself, balance. You'll see balance and harmony feeding into each other quite a bit into philosophy, and then inner peace. When someone is out of harmony, there's going to be excessive anxiety, restlessness, depression, which is really a result of low psychic energy resources. So we want to build those resources. When doing that, one of the first things that we talk about is building interoceptive awareness. And this really means teaching ourselves and the young people that we work with how to understand and feel into our bodies as we are moving through life. As I was sitting here, when I saw that Dr. Tracy Garrett was in here, I felt in my stomach a little bit of butterflies. I felt my finger wiggling a little. The anticipation was there. And I recognized through a lot of work on my part that I was feeling nervous, a little bit extra nervous. And that is something that I've cultivated over time, and especially in my last 2 years of my expressive arts program. And so that's something that we would want to work with a tween to do. We would want to talk them through sitting with their body. This is also something that Resmaa Menakem discusses quite a bit when talking about dealing with trauma, as trauma sits in the body, is really understanding the cues and our felt sense in the spaces that we're in. Okay. So again, interoception is knowing what is happening in your body. Okay. So we want to build some awareness of that. We want to instruct and work with our tweens to have that sense of interoception. And in doing so, we want to build curiosity about that. So we don't just want to feel it inside, but we want to delve deeper into it. So that means that we want to build some curiosity. So that could be asking questions like, what does that look like? Can you draw what that feeling is? Can you think about other times that you have had this feeling? If it was a color, what color would it be? If it was a sound, could you make that sound? Could you act out or gesture that? The externalizing and embodying of those feelings creates a stronger understanding, as well as it gives us an opportunity to see it at a distance. I think that this is very important. Other ways of working through this would be, of course, something like journaling, having the child, and again, ourselves, if we are so interested, to go in and note these things down, as well as using possibly something like a daily tracking method. So here's two options. This is an emotion and feeling wheel as a way to identify or help young children find words for their feelings. Or you can go a lot simpler and you can just use emojis, and we can help people to track their sense self and to track their feelings over time, which is a really important thing for everybody to have in their back pocket as a tool. Let me check my time. All right, we're doing okay. And so next we come to balance. As I mentioned before, you're going to see that balance and harmony are strongly related. And this has a lot to do for me and my interpretation in the support of stress reduction. Okay. So, oops, sorry, let me go back, sorry. Life as a dynamic process of energy fields and forces, and therefore our life task is to balance these seemingly competitive forces in a manner that brings about a unified whole. As I mentioned, this is, for me, this is about supporting stress reduction. Stress comes at us in a lot of different ways. And being able to balance the stress that we are feeling, that is bubbling for us, or that is coming at us, because stress can be thrown in our direction, just like any other energy can. The way to balance that out is to have reserves and build resilience in that space, build our capacity to deal with these things. So when you're looking at someone who's in balance, they'll have more sensitivity to themselves and to others. There'll be a lot of continuous reassessment because, again, in order to have balance, you need to be checking that balance quite a bit. That leads to stability. Again, that consistent checking. And our responses will be in proportion to the stress. You shouldn't be seeing a lot of big, huge response to something that seems quite small. So if you're out of balance, you're going to see a lot of negative cycles, blame and escape, and then a lot of losing touch or perspective. And ultimately, because we're talking about energy, a lot of losing of health. We know that stress is one of the most destructive things for our body. So activities that we can offer to youth in this space would be calming and regulating practices. Something like bilateral stimulation. Again, these are things that are often discussed by Resmaa Menakem, again, in his book, My Grandmother's Hands. So bilateral stimulation is a technique where you're alternating stimulation on both sides of the body, and that helps us ground ourselves when we're feeling anxious or panicky or just need to calm down our bodies a little bit. And there's a few different ways that you can do that. One of them would be something like butterfly tapping. We're engaging both sides of our body, we're moving both sides of our body, and this allows for a quicker space or quicker move or slide into grounding. You can draw or scribble. Sometimes it's better to tell someone to scribble than to draw, less pressure, with both hands. We'll do something similar. Resmaa Menakem discusses doing a body practice that involves not only looking around the space in front of you, but making a point to turn behind you. When you turn behind you on both sides, you are again engaging that bilateral. That turn is very important into the body. Okay. Something we can also offer our youth are guided meditations. Now, there are a lot of really wonderful apps for adults, teens, and even children to help them find places of calm and ways that they can slow themselves down. What we want to offer is forms to help us to regulate. Okay? If we can do it ourselves, we want to offer an opportunity for co-regulation as well. Just recently, my baby cousin, well, he's not a baby now. Don't tell him I said that. My younger cousin, Reynaldo, he's 6, and he got very upset that he was left, they had to go to bed, was left in the room by himself. And after about 20 minutes of his crying, I went into the room with him, sat down, held his hand, counted some breaths with him, helped him to breathe, helped him to calm himself down. I got him some water, and then I sat with him until he went to sleep, which at that point only took about 5 minutes. He needed that co-regulation. He was not in a space where he could contain that energy that he had created for himself. He had completely stressed himself out. Now, something that also could be used with someone like Reynaldo, or with the tweens that we're talking about, because Reynaldo's only 6, would be safe objects and safe places. There's wonderful sort of guided meditations or guided visualizations where you can ask a child to think of a safe place that they really love to go. Grandma's house, a special classroom, a park. Have them close their eyes and visualize it. Really give as much detail. What is the wind like? What color are the flowers? What does it smell like? Getting really deep in there, an anchoring place that you can then offer them the opportunity to go back to on their own. This is, again, another opportunity to help build resilience in a child, giving them a safe space that they can create for themselves in the moment. If the child is not quite ready for that, there's also safe objects. This is my little worry stone. I sometimes keep it in my pocket, rub my thumb on it. I am absolutely wearing my favorite headband. Rainbows make me feel special. Okay. These earrings are also my favorite. They remind me of going to my visit with my cousin. And so I'm wearing a lot of things that make me feel safe, make me feel powerful. We want to offer that same thing to the youth that we work with. Next, we're going to be looking at interconnectedness. Again, Into is spiritually based. Again, we're talking about essence. We're talking about oneness. Everything from a common source and composed of a common substance. Human experiences are connected internally and externally. To me, this is about developing a better understanding of relationship dynamics. Okay? Interconnectedness is sustained through the vessels of healthy relationships. These relationships should be congruent with the principles of Ma'at, which would be truth, justice, order, righteousness, and balance. Interconnectedness allows and facilitates sensitivity to others and to the larger environment. When interconnectedness is experienced more intensely, it's called love. Okay, again, we're talking about spirit. Spirit is not negative. Spirit is positive. So good mental health, good mental health is enhanced or diminished through the quality of one's relationship with the community. So again, we're talking about developing a better understanding of relationship dynamics. When someone is feeling the interconnectedness, you're going to see mutual dependency, interrelatedness, a sense of I am you and you are me, very Ubuntu, and empathy. You're going to see empathetic activity. When someone is not feeling that sense of interconnectedness, there's an absence of movement. They feel stuck because essentially they're drifting or alone. They're not in the flow. That means isolation, of lack of receptivity, and definitely a sense of being alienated. Okay. An activity that I really like for this would be something called genograms. These are based in family dynamics. That's how they were originally started. So it would be like a family tree where through symbols, you are able to give clues to the relationship dynamics, but they can be done in more abstract ways as well. So here I have 2 genograms that I made. This first one for a class I did for Miss Margaret Simpson. She's at this point, she's very old and doesn't want to be called Maggie anymore. And so this is based on the Simpsons family. We have Bart, we have Homer, we have aunts, we have Lisa and her pearls. But this map, this genogram, is a way to show about how connected Maggie / Margaret feels towards their family members. Okay? And that's really something that this can be used. What we want is for youth to be able to construct and better understand how they relate to other people, and giving them the option of either drawing it or using items, as you see in my second slide. I can't remember exactly what this one was for, but I think this one was actually a community genogram. So this had less to do with a family, had more to do with the resourced people that I want to be close to me, and ideals as well. So this one was done for me personally.
I'm Chuck.
Thank you. Let's see. Yes, so these are family models. They can be done for groups or communities. And again, it is a way to help a child sort of recognize the distance that or the closeness that they have with someone within a particular context. And understanding that, being able to parse that out either on a sheet of paper or using your body or a series of objects. If this is me, I think that my, my sense of time is way over here. And that's what I'm understanding right now. Okay, all of these are ways to help us, again, externalize, and if possible, if using our bodies, to embody these ideas, which will help them stick in a stronger way for the youth. Other things that can be done would be things like larger community connections, which would include volunteering, donating, and very specifically, our connection to nature. Once again, we are talking about we're talking about essence. Essence is throughout everything, and that includes nature. Something I like to remind people is that Western society often talks about nature as being competitive. It's dog eat dog, but it's not. It's synergetic. Yes, sometimes a dog eats another dog, but that dog needed to eat, and that dog is going to help something else. It's going to pull up some roots for something else. It's going to protect something else. Nature works in a synergetic fashion, and so we also need to be as immersed in that synergy as possible. Lastly, we'll be talking about authenticity. So in a relationship-oriented culture, genuineness or realness is of the highest value. So I want to talk about authenticity as an improvement in interpersonal communication. And two, is a process of helping people to communicate with their self and others about what their needs are in relationship with self and others. If they're not being authentic, they're going to be guarded, unaware, and they're going to have a failure to thrive or sometimes really even show up at all. When they are feeling authentic, you're going to see a lot of self-knowledge, openness, responding from spirit, a very spontaneous and natural place, and being very self-competent. Okay. Specifically, I really think that there are ways that we need to look at other ways that we can communicate feelings with teens and tweens. They have often a lot of trouble in, again, naming some of their feelings. So one of the things that I like is the idea of using music. And so I'm going to use one of my minutes to show this beautiful ad that I saw that I think speaks to this.
How was school?
I'm so sick of 17. I'm over this teenage dream. If someone tells me one more time, enjoy your youth, I'm gonna cry. They say these are the golden years, but I wish I could disappear. God. I'm just a mess, now I'm just a mess, and you're just a person that changed my life. Good day in my mind, safe to take a step out. Yes, I'm in now, let's go edge out.
Good morning. How are you feeling?
I feel okay.
Music can help you express how you're feeling. When you can't find the language, find the lyrics.
So as you can see, the Ad Council, I thought they did a really good job in expressing another way that we can communicate with tweens, another way that we can help them find a way to express themselves. So looking for those other forms of communication that can be really important. Also, practicing our communication is important. And so we talk about role playing. If your tween has a conversation that they want to have with someone, can they role play that with you? Can you be them? Can you be the person that they want to speak with? Can be very important. Sometimes it's also a little bit intimidating to talk to your parent, caregiver, or loved one as someone else. So you could also use something called the empty chair, which is where literally you talk to an empty chair. And you use that as a way to practice the authentic language that you want to use in this encounter. Okay. So wrapping up.
How was school?
Sorry. See if it'll let me wrap up. these 4 principles from Into Psychology: harmony, balance, interconnectedness, and authenticity promote a consciousness that creates order and an environment that is nurturing to the body, mind, and spirit. And that is ultimately what we want to do for our growing young people, especially having come through something so stressful and life-changing as the pandemic. Thank you very much. And that's not my phone number or email. How do I stop? Well, thank you.
Yay! Woo, woo, woo,
What a
woo.
great job,
Bravo.
Jennifer. Really.
Phenomenal.
You did an excellent job. The late, great Dr. Phillips would be so pleased right now, because that's how we want to use the framework of N2. It's something that when you get it, you're able to expand it and use it in a way that works for you. And you did that so well. I don't know if I was allowed to step in like that, but I just have to tell Jennifer that, because you did a great job. That was excellent.
Thank you so much. Whew.
I loved your presentation. I love that you you had so much information backing up all the things that you were presenting, that you put a lot of work into it, you could tell. And it was really interesting. There were things you sort of put together that were done so well. I loved every bit of your presentation. So thank you so much.
I put in the chat a link, Dr. Boston, Denise Boston, many of you may know. She was our former director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, teacher, phenomenon. She was my internal committee member, all beautiful things. She sent Rachel and I and several others a link to the Into conference that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So I put that link in the chat if anyone's interested in attending. It's both in person and virtual. And 2 of my favorite people on the planet will be presenting, in addition to Dr. Boston, Dr. Mark Bolton and Dr. Vincent Cook. And so I would strongly encourage all of you to register and attend.
Thank you for that.
Open the space for any other questions, or even opening up the chat for anyone who'd like to speak. I see Sarah's hand.
Hi, Jennifer. I just wanted to say that I just feel your presence as a growing therapist so beautifully, and I can just feel how much of a blessing you're going to be for all the young people that you're going to work with. It was just great to hear your journey through all those different fields and all those parts that are coming together in this new role. So thank you so much for teaching me about Into. That was great to experience as well, but congratulations.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Unless there's anything else, I want to just say phenomenal job, Jen. And I'm holding on to that part at the beginning of really seeing adultification and how the pandemic has had an influence. I did not think around how much exposure my kids have online and social media and all that over pandemic, and how that impacts their stress levels and development. So it's just a lot of eye-opening. I appreciate that. Eye-opening based, supported by these facts. So thank you. So please continue to flood the chat with feedback or reflections. And in the meantime, we will shift gears. We don't have a scheduled break, but please take care of yourself. We will shift to our second presenter for the day, Ashley Kellum. Ashley is a 2023 graduate candidate Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology, Integral Counseling. Welcome, Ashley.
Hello, everyone. Jen, I love your presentation. I felt the synchronicity in what I'm about to present, and I just feel chills and very privileged and honored to be in this moment with you all. So what I am going to be talking about, if it will present it. I'm going to be talking about dreaming together. But before we engage in this together, I just would like us to take a deep breath. One of my favorite podcasts is by LeVar Burton-Reed. And before he engages in his storytelling, he always takes a deep breath. And so if we can just take a moment to inhale together. And let's begin. Dreaming together, empowering community through archetypal storytelling. This is something that I'm very passionate about. I love storytelling, I love archetypes, but to give a little bit of a personal background of why this topic, why archetypes, why storytelling. I had a cursory understanding about psychology, but my background is actually in theater and creative writing. And so in my studies as a budding therapist in the counseling psychology department, I realized that the link that has followed me throughout my life, and I hope continues to follow me, is that I love to tell stories. Whether I am writing that and I am creating a narrative and a fantasy for people to engage with and engage in, or if I am fully embodying that with my body, with the words that I'm saying. And there's something really magical that happens as you are on stage as an actor, but as someone is also taking part in listening to that story. And so just recognizing the magic of that moment is, I think, what attracts me to storytelling. Some things that my background, what I'm interested in, that I think are very pertinent to what I'm bringing to the table with this presentation is that I have a lot of hospice volunteer experience and a lot of experience with youth mentoring and being part of the community. And the reason why I bring these two things in particular into this space is that dying in the Western world is a very individualized process. And so people are having to suffer alone, people are having to experience death alone, the process of dying alone, when this is something that all of us are going to experience, all of us are going to die one day. And instead of us being able to embrace that together, instead of us being able to carry a bit of that burden so that it's not a huge burden for someone to carry, we sideline people off to the sidelines to suffer, to die, to be afraid by themselves. And the same way with youth mentoring, there's not enough young people or young-ish people who are able to be there to help young people. And so there is a lot of wisdom which is lost. And so you have a lot of young people who are having to struggle and suffer alone instead of having someone who has been there, someone who has experienced those things, and maybe not the exact experience, but is able to offer a life raft so that people aren't drowning. And so that community involvement is something which is part and parcel to who I am. Some of my clinical interests that I think also contributes to why I decided to choose this topic. I am all about psychedelic assisted therapies. That is the reason why I decided to be here, why I decided to pursue wanting to be a licensed therapist. I could talk about it for days, and I'm super excited that there's going to be a conference that is going to be specifically centered around that. Some other hobbies that I think also kind of play into this sort of dreaming together in this archetypal work is Jungian psychotherapy, dream work, working with and integrating the margins, and archetypal storytelling. Just as a kind of like basic understanding what Jungian psychotherapy is, it's considered as a depth psychology. And so being able to go beneath the surface and kind of figure out what our defense mechanisms are, why we behave the way that we do, just what makes us us, and really untangling that. With dream work, I am not someone who subscribes to the notion that we just dream in order to kind of like reset and process what we did throughout the day. I believe that there is a lot of wisdom that comes through us in our dream space. And I think that there is a lot of internal wisdom that comes, wisdom that's from ourselves, that when we are asleep, we have our defenses lowered. And so we're able to access that wisdom that was always there. But because we have internalized other people's messages, we're not quite receptive to. And so I think in that dream space, we're able to access that. I think that we're also able to access the external wisdom. And I think that that wisdom is coming from ancestors. It's coming from this idea of collective consciousness, which is an idea or a concept around, regardless of where we come from, our backgrounds, we're all human beings and we all want to love. We are all here trying to figure out why we're here and to achieve our wildest dreams and to help people. And so I really see there being a potent power in that internal wisdom and that external wisdom coming together. In regards to working with and integrating the margins and archetypal storytelling, what has been the persistent question since I have begun my counseling journey is, how do I integrate what is otherwise seen as a luxury with people who are coming to me and they're just trying to survive? So I am in the middle of my practicum experience. And so I have a lot of people who have come in and they really want to untangle, like, why am I behaving the way that I'm behaving? Why is it that I'm having like these failures and these road bumps and these barriers when I'm trying to interact with people? Like, what is the cause of that? But then at the same time, they're trying to figure out, how am I going to make sure that I have food on the table? How am I going to make sure that I have all of my needs met? How am I going to pay for therapy? And so oftentimes, especially for the Black community, I have heard countless times, and even my own family will say, you know, Black people don't do therapy. And it's because so often it's seen as a luxury. And so for me, and I think with archetypal storytelling and what to integrate the two together is to show that this is integral to what it means to be a human being. That it's not a luxury, that it is just as important as feeding ourselves, as breathing, as sleeping. And one way I see that bridge sort of being made and created is through the hierarchy of needs. So the image on the left side of the screen is attributed to Maslow. And with it, it shows, as you can see at the bottom, basic needs. And then as you kind of fulfill those needs at the bottom, you're able to work yourself up at the top with self-actualization, which for me, I see self-actualization as kind of by way of psychotherapy. But one thing that has really irked me and really just not sat well with me is that if those basic needs aren't met, then you can't reach the top. So even if I'm able to provide for myself with food, with water, with shelter, I am still living in a world that is going to remain hostile towards me just because of the color of my skin. And so with that in mind, then what I internalize is that I can never be self-actualized, that I'm always going to be struggling, that I'm always going to be scraping and fighting and just trying to survive, that I don't have the energy, I don't have the money, I don't have the time to self-actualize. But recently I was introduced to the image on the right side of the screen, which shows a hierarchy of needs as informed by a First Nation or Indigenous non-Westernized perspective. And if you look at the bottom, you can see that self-actualization makes up the base, that makes up the core, that's the foundation. And then on top of that, you have community actualization. And so when I look at this, what comes to mind for me is, how do I know where I'm going if I don't know where I've come from? And so this really informs that process, that dance of, as I become self-actualized, then my community becomes self-actualized. And I see it as being kind of interchangeable, where when my community is self-actualized, when Black people know who they are, what they're about, then I, as a Black person, as a Black woman, then I also too become self-actualized. And so there's this constant sort of feedback that happens. And often in psychology field, we forget about that community aspect. We forget about the community healing. We forget about the nurturing that happens simultaneously with the community, between the community and between the individual. And so when you have that process that's happening, when you have that sort of percolating, then you get cultural perpetuity, which for me means legacy. Creating a legacy, building a legacy, and a legacy on your terms. You get to engage on your terms instead of internalizing what an oppressive systems say, what oppressive people say, who you are, what you're about. You already know that. And so you get to go out into the world and you get to continue to engage with that legacy on your terms. One way I see of internalizing that process is through the use of the hero's journey. And so the hero's journey is kind of like a template, which Joseph Campbell sort of synthesized together. He was kind of making observations with different cultures around the world and saw that regardless of the lack of interaction that they had, that there were certain points that every sort of culture and mythology had for each other. And so when I look at this, I think of my own hero's journey and my own call for me with wanting to go into counseling. And so my call was that I needed to be able to help people in more tangible ways. And that the way that I was doing that before, it wasn't quite what I needed to do. And so departing and trying to apply for this program and getting accepted and going through the trials and tribulations that come with that, with being a Black student in a predominantly white school. And I still feel like I'm still in that battle phase, but I know that I'm going to emerge victorious out of this, and that there is not just a gift that's just for me, that is going to help me and help my healing, but that I get to return back to my community, that I get to return back to my family, and I get to offer that gift back to them as well. And I think so much of what we learn, what we internalize, is that we're just here on this journey for ourselves. And instead, if we can begin to conceptualize a journey in which we are doing something for the whole, in which we are playing a part, and that part is also kind of speaking to us, I think that we get to control the narrative. Again, we get to control this narrative, but also too, we get to realize that we're not just doing this on our own, and we're not just doing this for ourselves, especially too with this idea of having a gift that we can offer back to the people that we love and that we care about. Another way I see this bridge sort of being gapped, this gap being bridged, and in order for us to control the narrative, is embodying the archetypal. And so there is a difference between the archetype and stereotypes, but I think there's still a bit of a blending of that. And so when I think of the archetypes or the stereotypes that have been sort of foisted onto Black people, I think about the mammy, I think about the magical Negro, I think about the angry Black woman, and then having to remind myself that those aren't archetypes, those aren't stereotypes which I have chosen for myself, and that I get to choose them for myself. I get to choose what archetype I'm going to embody. And that I don't have to take on the narrative. I don't have to be the side character in my own story just because outside forces try to dictate that to me. And so what comes to mind, the archetype of the Black sheep. I'm considered the Black sheep in the family, and for a long time I wrestled with that. But as I've been able to grow and my own sort of evolution and the evolution that I've seen with my community and my involvement with the community, I've been able to reclaim that archetype. And so instead of seeing the Black sheep as someone or something that is ostracized from the whole, I see myself instead as being someone who is adventurous enough to go off into the wild. And do what the people back home, the sheep back home, don't feel like they are capable of doing because they've internalized this message that they can't do it. And instead, I get to go off and I bring back with me wonder. I bring back with me what if. I bring back with me hope. And I think that when we kind of frame archetypes as playing into that, then it opens up a whole new world of possibility for us. So what is the data on this? As is the case for a lot of things when it comes to psychology and Black people, there's not a lot of widespread knowledge when it comes to how can Jungian psychology or archetypal work or dream work be applied to Black communities. It's been used to identify and synthesize the idea around the Christ figure archetype, around kind of digging deeper into masculinity and into femininity. It's even been used towards the genocide of the Holocaust. But when it comes to Black people, it's pretty much crickets. And so what I guess I'm hoping to offer with this presentation is what's next? What can we do as individuals? What can we do as individuals, part of a community, to begin to dream together, begin to inspire some dreams within ourselves? And one way I see that happening is through keeping a dream journal for yourself. So when you go to sleep and you wake up, just scribbling down what images, what quotes, what words, or who says what to you. And then also to daydreaming, allowing ourselves to daydream and really dropping into this childlike space as well. So the suggestion around listening or watching cartoons that you used to watch as a child, maybe finger painting, using your hands and coloring, doing cartwheels if you can do that, really dropping into this childlike space and occupying the nonverbal. So listening to music, moving your body, just engaging with the senses outside of the adult cognitive mind, where we have these internalized messages. And also, what is probably the most important, I think, is sharing your dreams with others. So for myself, I have people within my own intimate life who I share my dreams with. And they do the same thing. So each morning I wake up and I'm thinking about what I dreamt about, and I get to share that with someone else. And there's something so magical in being able to share your dreams with someone. And so in that process, I've been able to clarify my vision of myself, the vision of who I am, what I want to do with my life. And in turn, when people share their dreams, the same thing is happening. So there's this nice interchange that's happening as we're empowering one another. And then the image that you see before you is an iteration of the myth of the flying Africans. And so the next slide that I'm going to show, Toni Morrison is going to be talking briefly about how she used this myth and how she also used it in relation to her story, Song of Solomon.
Thinking about a story I had always heard, because I was very enchanted with the myths that and saga and mythological stories that had been told to us as we were kids. Because I thought the one thing you say about a myth is that there's some truth in there, no matter how bizarre they may seem. And the one that I had always heard that seemed like just a child's wish was the one about black people, black slaves, who came to the United States, and under certain circumstances they would fly back to Africa. So that's, it's an escape thing, it's a little psychological trick. But when I looked at it more closely, I read a lot of those slave narratives, that they published in the 30s. And the interviewer would ask certain basic questions, and then some others. He or she always asked that. Have you ever heard of flying Africans? Or people taking up and flying back to Africa? They also asked about ghosts, trying to get at the heart of their mythology and their magic. And everybody said one of two things. No, I never saw any, but I heard about it.
Yes.
Or they said they had seen it. Most people said, yeah, I never saw it, but there was a woman there. So it wasn't like they said, no one said, what are you talking about? In Africa, where you get that? They all had heard it. So I knew there were some people, Georgia C. Allen people, who still had this thing. So I thought about that which I thought was a much more interesting way. Instead of just being a child or a sort of naive escape story, it's about flight.
Yes.
It really is about flight. And flight comes up a lot in spirituals. I'll fly away. Oh, Jesus, I'll fly away.
Understandably.
Understandably.
Yes.
So what is there about that? It's probably escape. It's also the move away from earth into things that were more spiritual. I mean, it has a lot of connotations. So I'm thinking, how can I make a contemporary story about a black man, young black man, who learns to fly, or who makes his escape? Not geographical escape back to Africa, but another mindset.
Yes.
How does he escape the prison, the cultural prison that he found himself in? And that was his journey. It's a kind of an unlearning and a learning.
Fantastic.
But it was all embedded in my, those little questions you ask about a very simple story.
And so every time I've watched that clip a number of times, but every time I watch it, I'm just reminded of as Black people, as African Americans, we get to tell the story of our lives. And oral tradition is part and parcel to who and what we are. It's helped us survive. But so often we've internalized this narrative that someone else has to tell us our story. And I hope that with this presentation, hoping that we can dream a little bit more than we've been allowed to, that we can fly, that we don't feel constrained. And the last part of this presentation is I'm going to play a song. And as it's playing, I just want you all to consider, what is your myth? What is the myth of your people, where you come from? What's the archetype that you embody? What is an archetype that you would like to embody? And when you're thinking about your hero's journey, you can be thinking about all of it, or you can be thinking about a certain part of it. You can be thinking about when you hear the call, and what's the call? What is it that stirs within you that says, go out on this journey? Or you can think about, what is the gift that is given to you so that you have the strength to endure, so that you can survive and that you can thrive in your journey. Or maybe it is as you have received your gift and your reward from battling in those subconscious unknown forces, and you arise, and what is it that you are bringing back to your community? What is it that you are bringing back to your family? How are you received? And so as this is playing, I just invite you, you can turn off your cameras, to lay down, to really drop deep into that dreaming space and allow yourself to fly. So I just want to honor the sacredness of this moment. And I hope that you all have sweet dreams tonight and that you guys dream about flying. Thank you.
That's like silent snap.
Wonderful.
Mhm. Honoring the pace of where we are right now while also making room for any reflections, any curiosities, and put it in the chat. Raise your hand and I can see you. Maybe we just take a few collective breaths together. Hope that both you, Jen, as well as Ashley are able to read the chat and receive all of the love, all the reflection from your presentations today. Don't have much to say for this closing. I feel like that was such a sweet kiss and send off. Some of us might still have things to do. Maybe we can take a nap before we transition to our evening. I do want to just speak a few words to logistics, if I dare. One is that we would love to see all of you. Hello. We would love to see all of you again for the next 2 weeks as we continue our presentation series. The next 2 Thursdays, both the 13th of October as well as the 20th of October from 4 to 6 p.m. One thing is that you will need to register. Each of these are separate registrations, even though it's the same registration link. So in a moment, not just yet, I wonder, Paula, if you are able to put the link for registration, or Damali, if someone is available to put the link for registration into the chat, and maybe just jump ahead and register for the next 2 weeks right now, so that you have your Zoom links and you have that slotted in your schedule. And secondly, thank you, Paula. And secondly, if you are a Black identified student in one of the 5 MCP programs here at CIIS, please consider applying for the 2022-2023 cohort. Registration is open. Registration will be open through the middle of November. So please submit your application, and the programming begins in the first week of December. So please consider applying and being a part of this growing community. And yeah, if you have any questions, I will be staying online to answer any questions about application or registering if you're having any challenges. But in the chat, register in advance for the next 2 weeks, and we will be doing this again. We have 2 presenters next week, and we close it out with 3 presentations on the 20th. I look forward to seeing you all in community again soon.